Hi, this is a Curvy 3D tutorial in the Gigantic series, where we've been sculpting this giant. In this episode we'll be adding details to his head, including the horns and hair. On the left we've got the one we're going to aim towards, and on the right we're going to start modelling. So I'm using the lathe tool to draw the first horn. This gives us a lot of control over the shape. Then with the move tool, I'm holding shift and dragging it in and out of the screen. Notice at the top where the curves are spaced out, it flattens off the end of the shape, but we can flatten it off more by turning off the smooth curved cap and reducing the bevel to a tight edge. Now in the side view we're reshaping the curve again using the soft move tool. It doesn't matter if the curve gets a bit messy because we can always use the smooth rulers to turn it back into a nice smooth curve. Just placing it the way I want coming out of the skull. Notice using the lathe we can slightly vary the width along the length nicely so it looks more natural. The line tool is a more uniform shape. Now I want to make this look slightly more natural going into the skull, so we're going to sculpt with the add tool and a small radius just to give it some sort of socket where the skin's wrinkling up around the bottom of the horn. I'm using the pinch to slightly tighten up that shape, and now going back to the add tool to add some little ridges around the horn. Anywhere where two objects meet, if it's a straight line, it looks quite unnatural, so trying to break up that straight line with these little ridges makes them sit more naturally together. Now for the chin I'm going to add some more horns. This time they're quite small and simple, so I'm just going to use a line object. By default these have smooth caps at the end. We can change the radius B to pinch one end of the line. Just going to move this into place. So at the moment it's a stubby rounded horn. Just tweaking the shape and using the smooth ruler again. If we turn off the smooth rounded caps and reduce the bevel, we can make it look as if that horn's been sawn off or filed off as well. Just tweak the two radii to get it into the right shape. Add a bit of a curve. That's about right. Now we're going to do the same process we did for the top of the head. We're going to just add a little ridge and some bumps to make it look more naturally seated in the face. While we're here with the sculpt tool, I'm going to add a few little dimples and lines to show that the skin's really sort of bunched up and angry. So each of those I've done a dimple, a spot with a pinch sub brush, and then a little line coming off it to show the wrinkle, and some tiny little dots on the nose and the forehead. Getting a good variety of large and small details helps the look of the model. Again, really scrunching that nose up so he looks nice and angry. And you can switch between adding and subbing with the left and right mouse buttons. So I can add creases and ridges quite quickly. Use the mirror tool To make it symmetrical, select the horns, group them with Ctrl-G, Ctrl-C to copy, and use Edit Paste Mirrored to make a copy on the other side of the head. Just add a tiny little ridge in the middle of the nose, again to make it look more natural. Okay, the next step, I'm going to add in some placeholders for the hair. Now I'm going to be making the hair later on in Blender while I set up the materials and the rendering. But for now, I just want some simple meshes in place so I can get an idea of where that hair is going to sit and what it's going to look like. So I'm making a big, rough lathe object around the head, which is going to be the hair on the scalp. Just use the auto lathe to make a third curve. Just dragging that into shape. I want my curves lined up with the axes, so I'm switching to the 4 view so I can drag the curves in the left side. Again, this just has to be a rough shape because we're going to be sculpting it, and later on we're going to be replacing it with a hair particle system. For stylized characters, you might just want to keep the hair as a mesh and just sculpt lots of nice ridges and creases into it so it looks like locks of hair. So here I'm using the add and the sub brushes with a bit of pinch to make creases and ridges, using the mirror tool, and just tweak the colour so it stands out compared to the rest of the head. Now in this case I know that my posed model for my illustration is going to be pretty much facing front, so I don't worry about the side and the back. I leave them smooth. Next I'm using the Blob Tool. Now where the lathe you draw 2 sides, the blob you draw an entire loop around the object. So I've drawn this blob with like finger shapes coming out of it. And now I'm going to use the add with a bit of pinch to make ridges as if they're locks of hair, using the right mouse button to make creases. I did a mirror on that mesh. Sometimes when you mirror, it turns the object inside out, so you have to do mesh reverse faces to make it pop the right way around again. Finally, ear, again using a blob, so I'm drawing the complete outline of where I want the ear. I'd use the same process for a more human ear. And increasing the bevel basically sets a thickness for that blob, so I can make a fairly sort of flat shape, which I want for the ear. And then I'm using the subtool with pinch to cut in some basic shapes. The ear's not a focal point in this in the final model, so I'm just doing this fairly roughly. If you wanted more control, you could zoom in, use lower intensity brushes, and spend longer on it. Just rotating the ear back so it falls back against the head. Using the soft move tool to make a few more tweaks to the shape. So again, we've just been using a few of the simple brushes, add, sub, and pinch. There are quite a few other sculpting brushes we can use, but sometimes it's easiest to keep it simple. And there's the head with ears, and the next part will be posing the character.